Janice joined the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society New Jersey chapter in 2016 and currently serves as the president. She is the editor of the Family Times newsletter, and she is responsible for managing the Facebook page for the AAHGS-NJ Jersey chapter. She has conducted her family research for the past 25 years and documented her family history back to 1720. She is proud of her ancestors, which include farmers, educators, of which 2 founded colleges, midwives, and pastors. She is passionate about history and genealogy and believes that her ancestors chose her to tell their story. And she is always willing to assist anyone who may be interested in researching their family history. So I'd like to formally welcome Janice here today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to go through. First, we will be answering your questions at the end of the program today, but please feel free to ask them at any time using the questions box in the GoToWebinar dashboard, or you can email me directly, and my email address is on the screen there. There will be a survey provided at the end of this program, as well as in a follow-up email. If you can please complete the survey, we always greatly appreciate your feedback, and it helps us move forward as we try to plan our future programming. And if you're interested maybe more about the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, you can visit their web address on the screen there and get some cool information that's there. One last thing before we get started, for those of you who may be new to GoToWebinar, this is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a laptop or a desktop. If you're using a mobile device, this is going to be different depending if you're using Apple or Android. But all of the features will be there. If you do not see this dashboard, there is an orange box with a white arrow that should be at the top left or right hand side of your screen. If you click on that button, that will open and close the dashboard, so it's possible the dashboard loaded closed on you. At any time, if you need help and can't figure something out, there is a raise hand button. You can hit that. That'll alert me that you're having some type of issue. I will send a message to you, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve that. Again, as I mentioned, we'll be taking questions at the end, but you can submit them at any time, and there's a questions box here, as well as on your mobile device. There should be a tab for that. You can just type in your question there, hit send, and again, we'd be happy to answer that at the end of the program. So that is everything that I have for you today. So it is my pleasure to turn it over to Janice.
One second. Thank you so much, Andrew, and also to the New Jersey State Library. And I'm excited. This is my first time actually presenting for you, and I'm hoping that you, as well as the participants, will appreciate the information that I'm sharing. My presentation is entitled Hidden Figures Revealed, African American Notables in a Union County Town, Summit, New Jersey. Just want to do my own personal welcome, and I have always loved history. Over 25 years ago, I began conducting research as a genealogy project when my husband suggested that I do so. It's been an amazing journey as I've been able to trace my family as far back as 1720. One Sunday, while driving to church in another town, I noticed a church was celebrating their 90th anniversary, and that was a little startling to me because I had no idea that this church had existed for so long. So this is what actually led me to start my research on African Americans and churches in Summit. It will be an ongoing project, and I will continue to share what I discover. And today's presentation is not an all-inclusive project or presentation. There's still much more to discover. Thank you for joining me today. Just a little information that I wanted to share about Summit. The area where Summit is located was purchased from Native Americans on October 28, 1664, and I never knew that. European settlers came to the area around the year 1710, and historical context is so important, and knowing that I've been able to trace my family back to 1720, this really stands out for me. The original name of Summit was Turkey Hill, which I found hilarious because I've seen turkeys walking and flying all over the place, so I can understand that. Then it became known as Turkey, New Providence's original name until 1759. During the American Revolutionary War, Summit was known as Beacon Hill because bonfire beacons were lit on an eastern ridge in Summit to warn the New Jersey militiamen of approaching British troops. Summit was called the Heights over Springfield during the late 18th century and most of the 19th century and was considered a part of New Providence. During this period, Summit was part of Springfield Township, which eventually broke up into separate municipalities. Eventually, only Summit and New Providence remained joined. So as I began my research, I was curious about where did most of the folks that are here, African Americans, where did they come from? Where were their parents born? And so I love using Ancestry.com and decided to do a search. Previously, I had done some research for the 1860 slave schedule or census records and saw that folks were here as far back as 1860. And then for the 1870 to 1940 census records, I found that most folks came from Barbados, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Jamaica, Mississippi, Missouri, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, which is where I'm originally from, St. Martin's, Trinidad, Tobago, and also Virginia. The first person that I wanted to highlight before I talk about her, I found that her name is Reverend Florence Spearing Randolph. And it was just interesting knowing that the challenges that women faced at the time that she was born and came to New Jersey. I found her story to be empowering, inspiring. She had a just do it attitude, and she was focused on the mission that she had to accomplish. And a woman being pastor, wait till you hear some of the things that she's done. Florence Spearing Randolph, she was born on either August 6th or August 9th in 1866. She passed away December 28th, 1951. She was an American club woman, a suffragist, an ordained minister, and pastor of the Wallace Chapel AME Zion Church in Summit, New Jersey, from 1925 to 1946. She organized the New Jersey Federation of Colored Women's Clubs and was president of the New Jersey Women's Foreign Missionary Society. Florence was one of the first women in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church denomination to be ordained as a deacon in 1901 and also as an elder in 1903 and licensed to preach. I still find that astounding because even to this day, there's so many women that, not women, well, some women and men that have a challenge accepting a woman as a pastor. She came to the Wallace Chapel as a temporary pastor in 1925. This arrangement was soon made permanent, and she was the church's pastor for over 25 years until she retired in 1946. During her tenure, the church built its current building and paid the debts incurred in full. She was a delegate to an international ecumenical conference in London in 1901. As head of the New Jersey Women's Foreign Missionary, she set up a bureau of supplies to collect and distribute donations for missionaries. She also visited AME Zion missionaries in Liberia and Ghana from 1922 to 1924. Florence served on the executive board of the New Jersey Women's Suffrage Association, and in 1915, she was founder and president of the New Jersey Federation of Colored Women's Clubs. Now, my next slide I found very interesting because it says it's a directory for my town or for Summit. And she was listed as the pastor of the church. I love old newspaper articles, and it gives so much additional information or context as far as what was going on at the time. Another article that I came across was that the New Jersey Historical Commission actually had a traveling exhibit for her in 2009, and it was entitled An Unsung Heroine of the Cloth. And then the next clip underneath here, which I found, I was like, I love this. It was talking about her having a speaking engagement, and it said, the Reverend Florence Randolph of Jersey City, an eloquent woman preacher, also an official of the WCTU, will preach morning and evening. And again, back during this time, if you go back and do a survey, you'll find that you did not have a large number of female pastors. So I found her story to be empowering again and inspiring, and that no matter what she faced or, you know, what people thought, she just did what she felt she was called to do. The next person that I'd like to highlight is Violet A. Johnson. And again, just like Reverend Randolph, she was the same way. If there was something that she wanted to do, she did it, nothing stopped her. And I'm just hoping that you'll appreciate the information I'll share about her. She was born in Wilmington, North Carolina, and she was actually a servant for the John Eggers family in the 1890s, first in New York and then in Summit in 1897. In the late 1890s, she organized a small Bible study group that came to Summit, and it was the first African American church that she helped to establish, Fountain Baptist Church, which is around the corner from me. Actually, both churches that I'm going to talk about in this presentation are not that far from me. At the church, Johnson was founder and president of the Missionary Society and president of the Deaconess Board, among other leadership roles. By joining the all-white New Jersey Women's Suffrage Association, Johnson's leadership helped transform New Jersey's women's suffrage movement into a multiracial movement. And I found this very interesting in that I was educated here in New Jersey, and I've never heard about Reverend Florence or Violet Johnson prior to me doing this work. During World War I, she organized Black women and girls for war relief work and kept the clubs going after the war. After suffrage was won in 1920, she organized voter registration campaigns and gave speeches on behalf of candidates she endorsed. In the late 1920s, Johnson established the Girls Industrial Home, a school for training African American women and girls for domestic work. She was a founder and officer of the Summit chapter of the NAACP and served as a trustee of the National Training School for Women and Girls in Washington, D.C. She was also active in the Federation of Colored Women's Clubs of New Jersey as chair of its anti-lynching campaign. Again, if she believed in something, she put her mind to it to be a part of the solution. And the information, I haven't seen a lot of information other than what the church has offered, but I plan to do additional research on her life because the work that she did, I find it to be outstanding. On this slide, and there were numerous clippings that I could have included, but I wanted to keep the presentation just short and to the point. But a number of clippings where it talked about her being involved politically, which once again for 1921 and with women and just folks feeling that women should be at home and not doing anything. Here's another woman that's out there, a person of color, making a difference. So she spoke at numerous Republican events hosted by women. And these are two articles that cover that. And if you do a search on her, if you have an account with newspapers.com, you should be able to see these clippings and additional ones. And the New York Age spoke about, ran an article about her girls' industrial home. And then if you look to the right, there's the news in Paterson, New Jersey, where she was one of the noted speakers at a suffrage rally. The next person I'd like to highlight is Willie James Wilson. And I was speaking to my husband because they're actually friends. They grew up together and find his story interesting as well, and one of the persons that I chose to highlight. Wilson was born in Montgomery, Alabama, but moved to Summit, New Jersey at 7 years old. He was a highly regarded high school baseball, football, and basketball player at Summit High School. In his senior year, he hit, or his average was .436 and stole 28 bases in 28 attempts. He played 19 seasons in Major League Baseball for the Kansas City Royals, Oakland Athletics, and Chicago Cubs. He was an outfielder known for his speed and ability as an effective leadoff hitter. Wilson coached the Toronto Blue Jays system in 1995 and 1997. He was elected to the Royals Hall of Fame in 2000. In 2003, Wilson was named manager of the London Monarchs of the fledgling Canadian Baseball League, but the league folded halfway through the season. Wilson also came out of retirement in 2009, signing a one-day contract, which I found interesting, with the Kansas City T-Bones, a team playing in the Independent Northern League. He currently runs the Willie Wilson Baseball Foundation in Kansas City, Missouri. And we actually had him speak, do a presentation at our church. He is very active still and loves helping young people and pointing them in the right direction and sharing his story, as he's had, he had a few challenges, but he just shared that you can overcome. John Mallory, this is another sports figure, is a former professional American football player who played defensive back for the Philadelphia Eagles and Atlanta Falcons. At Summit High School, Mallory won honors in football, basketball, and track. His sophomore year, he was ranked 11th in the nation in punt return with the WVU, West Virginia University record of 342 yards. 3 of these returns were long touchdowns. Mallory started the last 3 games on the 1965 squad, and as a result, Carlin made him primarily a cornerback. With only 3 games experience, he became an All-Southern Conference first team and Associate Press All-American honorable mention defensive back his junior year. He ranked among the nation's best punt returners, 34 for 596 yards, a 17.5-yard average, and 5 touchdowns. Mallory was considered by Carlin to be the best receiver on the team, but was more valuable on defense. He also lettered in track and ran the 440-yard and mile relays for the Mountaineer Trackmen. John would then go on to be drafted in the 10th round by the NFL's Philadelphia Eagles. He played in all 14 games his rookie season. The next year, he was traded to Atlanta, where he became the Falcons' all-time punt returner. John also played 2 seasons with the WFL's Houston Texans, recording 7 interceptions. John was inducted into the West Virginia University Hall of Fame in 2001. He was also inducted to the School of Physical Education Hall of Fame in 2004. The next person I wanted to highlight is very special to us, Lawton C. Johnson. We have 3 children, and they attended, it was at the time, Summit Junior High School. And we know him personally, and I hope that you can appreciate the information that we'll share about him. Lawton C. Johnson was born in Summit, New Jersey, and he studied piano under instructor Capitola Dickerson. And one of the recurring themes that you'll see in some of the folks that I'm highlighting is that they knew each other. After graduation from Summit High School, he began working at what was then called Summit Junior High School, rising to office manager and continuing working until retiring in August 2007. While a student, he was a part-time office assistant from 1954 through 1956. After graduation, he became school secretary in 1956. In 1962, he became office manager. During his 52-year career, he worked for 6 school superintendents. He did extensive volunteer work for numerous school-related committees, event planning groups, YMCA boards, communications groups, civics groups, newspaper editing, and other charitable events. He was elected Young Man of the Year in 1961 by Summit Area Junior Chamber of Commerce, and he was named in the 1965 edition of Outstanding Young Men in America. He embodied dedication, hard work by being the first one to arrive at school each morning and the last one to go home each evening, sometimes working through the weekend if necessary in order to get a job done. Amazingly, for 47 of his 52 years, Mr. Johnson did not miss one day of work. Johnson received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service Keeper of the Dream Award and the Tri-City Branch NAACP Community Service Award. In October 2007, Summit Mayor Jordan Glatt proclaimed October 2nd, 2007 as Lawton C. Johnson Appreciation Day in recognition of his years of outstanding service to the city, the middle school, and to his church, which will be highlighted momentarily. In 2004, the Summit Board of Education decided to rename the middle school in Johnson's honor. Most of Summit schools are named after founding fathers. The middle school's renaming was a first for the city, an honor never before given an employee. Johnson was described as a gifted, remarkable, compassionate, and uniquely talented person. According to Reverend Harriel, and he's the pastor actually of one of the churches I'll speak about, who first approached the Summit Board of Education with the idea of renaming the middle school after Johnson. He touched the lives of so many people, and I can personally attest to that. The next person I want to share, his name is Bill Robinson. Bill Robinson is a tenor jazz singer from Summit, New Jersey. He has had a long career and continues to perform into his 80s. He has performed with jazz pianist Betty List, jazz guitarist John Zweig and John Carlini, violinist Marion Mansfield, mandolinist Don Sternberg, Brian Glassman, and many others. He sings in a variety of jazz styles, including the Great American Songbook, jazz standards, bluegrass music, classical music, gypsy music, Brazilian jazz, and others. He has performed at the Apollo Theater in New York. He has opened for comedian Jackie Mason and jazz vibraphonist Lionel Hampton. As a youth, Robinson began singing at the age of 6, was influenced by singers such as Louis Armstrong and Cab Calloway. And I chose to highlight him because this is a person that I have, been to churches and heard him sing. But my husband actually went to school with one or two of his daughters, and I just never knew his history until I saw him in the newspaper one day and just thought, wow, living local history that I didn't know about. So that's one of the reasons why I chose to highlight him today. Norman Hill, another person until I started doing this work that I hadn't heard of. Norman Hill is an influential administrator, activist, and labor leader. Hill was born on April 22nd, 1933, here in Summit. He attended Haverford College in Pennsylvania and received a bachelor's degree in 1956 in the field of sociology. He was one of the first African Americans to graduate from Haverford. After attending college, Hill served in the military. After returning home from service, he moved to Chicago to join in the civil rights movement and to pursue a master's degree in the University of Chicago School of Social Welfare, which he dropped in favor of more direct social action. Hill was appointed Chicago coordinator and held various positions in projects around Chicago, including Youth March for Integrated Schools, Secretary of Chicago Area Negro American Labor Council, and staff chairman of the Chicago March Conventions. Norman put his attention on the Congress of Racial Equality, which he joined in the 1960s. He served as the first East Coast Field Secretary and then moved his way up to the position of National Program Director. As National Program Director, he coordinated the Route 40 desegregation of restaurants, the Waldorf campaign, and illustrated the civil rights demonstration that took place, at the 1964 Republican National Convention. Hill served as the legislative representative and civil rights liaison of the Industrial Union Department of the AFL-CIO from the mid to late 1960s. His focus in the organization was the issue of raising minimum wage and the labor delegation on the Selma to Montgomery marches against racial discrimination in politics and voting in the Southern United States. And this is a constant refrain for me, but again, working on this project, I educated myself because I'd never heard of Norman Hill before. The next person I'd like to focus on is Capitola L. Dickerson. Capitola Leodra Dickerson, also known as Cappy Dickerson, was a piano instructor in Summit. She was a graduate of the Juilliard School in Manhattan who was notable for teaching several generations of students. Dickerson taught piano to thousands of students over a period of 78 years. She emphasized precision, sticking strictly to piano compositions as written and practiced. In 2004, she was quoted in the LA Times for stressing the benefits of practice. She taught New Jersey preschoolers in Cranford and Milburn, and she taught music to the hearing impaired. And I found that phenomenal. According to one estimate, her students live in all 50 states in the United States. She was revered by local authorities for her volunteer service and civil rights contributions and community leadership. Some of her pupils have been renowned, such as Tom Varner and Lawton C. Johnson, and we spoke about the school before being named after him. And she was friends with renowned jazz singer Bill Robinson, and just spoke about him a moment ago. In 2011, she was presented with a key to the city by Summit Mayor Jordan Glatt. According to business executive Frank Bolden, She was a quiet, unselfish person who lived by the golden rule of treating others as one wished to be treated oneself. Capitola was born in, and now this history is very, very interesting about her because I was just like, wow, because I love history. Capitola was born in Urbana, Ohio, to Amanda and Lee Dickerson, but she made Summit, New Jersey, her home where she lived for more than 78 years. Her mother died when she was a teenager, and she lived with her father until she graduated from high school in 1930. She lived with relatives, including her grandfather, Benjamin, an ex-slave who had witnessed a Civil War battle at the age of 10 in the state of Virginia. She was denied entrance to the Diller Quayle School because of racial discrimination, but studied piano with Helen Crystal Bender of the Summit School of Music. She worked as a domestic, and at one point she worked at Bell Labs before becoming a music teacher. She attended Columbia University and New York University and graduated from the Juilliard School in New York City. She was a member of the Wallace Chapel AAHGS-NJ Church for over 80 years and served as the church's historian. And so I'm convinced that other than information that has been donated from the family of Reverend Florence Randolph, Spearing Randolph, that Capitola was actually the historian and knew about Florence. Following are some articles that I found about Capitola, and there were so many articles, but I just decided to choose 3 to put in this presentation. And so in the Courier News, May 15, 1950, she was highlighted at the end there. And I thought it was interesting in this second paragraph here. It says the chorus, an organization of employees of the Bell Telephone Laboratories at Murray Hill, New Jersey, has a director this year, Leo W. Collins of the Juilliard School, who also directs the Guild Choir at Riverside Church in New York. Miss Capitola Dickerson of Summit is the accompanist. And I just thought it was interesting that it didn't mention that she was also a student at Juilliard. The middle article here is an ad from the item of Milburn and Short Hills, June 19, 1958, where it describes her offering classes for children. And then to the right, you'll see an article, the Herald News, June 17, 1959. And she was very involved with the YWCA, and they used to have conferences. And at the very end, down at the bottom, it says, and Miss Capitola Dickerson of Summit will direct, or she'll head up all group singing and conduct the music workshop. Next up is Wallace Chapel AAHGS-NJ Church of Summit. And this church, again, is not far from where I live. And Lawton C. Johnson, I spoke about him earlier. He actually attended this church. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was also one of the ministers of music there for a time. Wallace Chapel AAHGS-NJ Church was organized in 1923, and the church building was completed in 1937, the second Black church in that city. It was listed on the New Jersey and National Registers of Historic Places in 2007. In 2008, the General Conference of the AAHGS-NJ Church designated Wallace Chapel AAHGS-NJ Church a historical landmark of the AAHGS-NJ Church as well. The congregation was first established in 1923 and met at the local YMCA 2 years later. The Reverend Florence Spearing Randolph, and I spoke with, she was the first person that I shared about today, a former suffragist and activist, was appointed temporary pastor. In 1928, the church acquired its first building, a small house on the church's current site with enough space on the first floor to seat 100 people at services. This duplex house is now the parsonage and community house. Reverend Dr. Florence S. Randolph served as pastor of the church from 1925 until her retirement in 1946. Reverend Dr. Denison D. Harriel Jr. was appointed as pastor of the church on October 1st, 1989, and I believe he is still the pastor of the church and very involved in our local community. The next church is Fountain Baptist and that's another church that's around the corner from me. The history of Fountain Baptist Church began 100 years ago when 6 domestic workers met to form a Christian Endeavor Society, prayer, and Bible study group for African Americans in Summit, New Jersey. This initial meeting, held at 59 Summit Avenue on Friday evening, July 9th, 1897, was called by Violet A. Johnson, Annie Tucker, and Wilson Burrell. And if you'll recall, early on in the presentation, I spoke about Violet A. Johnson. Within 6 months, the Bible study group had found a spiritual leader, Reverend Walter Sproul, and moved to the corner of Morris and Chestnut Avenues. Under Reverend Sproul's leadership, the prayer group formed a mission, a place where all Christians, regardless of denomination, might gather and worship. Shortly thereafter, the small band moved into a rented room at Park, or Broad Street, and Chestnut Avenue, the most densely populated and built-up part of Summit. It was here that Fountain Baptist Church, the first African-American church in Summit, was born on June 16, 1898. Within the first few months, the members organized a building fund to purchase a permanent church home. 6 months after becoming a full-fledged church, the congregation moved once again, this time to larger quarters at 493 Springfield Avenue. Fountain would remain at this location for approximately 8 years. And I remember when we moved to Summit, I remember that location, and I believe my husband actually performed a wedding ceremony there. In 1906, under the leadership of Reverend Edward N. McDaniels, the 5th pastor, Fountain was incorporated and purchased land at 21 Chestnut Avenue. Although erection of a church edifice was begun, the congregation could only afford to complete the basement. On Christmas Eve, 1908, the congregation entered its basement home, constructed at a cost of $3,700. What church can you build now for that amount of money? The vision of the founders that July evening in 1897 continues to unfold. They continue to be a vital part of the Summit community and throughout the state, and also internationally in the service manner, rather. The next person I'd like to highlight is actually a friend of our family. My husband attended high school with her, and just very delightful story that I'd like to share about Susan Hairston. Susan Hairston is a civic leader and an accomplished operations executive in philanthropy. She lives an unapologetic life of service for the well-being of humanity. She is a fierce champion for educational excellence, a successful community organizer, and this is the reason why I chose her. Susan made history in November 2019 by being elected Summit, New Jersey's first African-American council member in the 150-year history of our town. She is a trusted coalition builder and has organized events bringing together government officials and diverse organizations across the globe. She was appointed to serve on several government and nonprofit boards, including Commissioner of the Union County Board of Taxation, the Center for Effective Philanthropy Advisory Board, Union County College's Board of Governors, the Board of Education, and co-chair of the Mayor's Forum for Diversity. Susan joined the JPB Foundation, a national foundation that focuses on transformational initiatives that impact people in poverty, sustain the environment, and enable medical research, after previously directing the Ford Foundation's $450 million annual grant-making operations team. Fueled by her faith and love of family, Susan has been an active member of Jack and Jill of Greater Union County and sustains herself with friends, fun, and worship at the Fountain Baptist Church. Again, folks being connected in the past and present. Just want to talk a little bit about her parents. We had a conversation and just wanted to share that Susan's father, Julius Dillingham, was the first African-American police officer in Summit. Her mother, Joyce Dillingham Miles, was a working mom with a generous spirit and relentless work ethic who retired from Fair Oaks Hospital after decades of long service. She taught Susan that if you complain, you also need to make a plan to make things better, which I totally agree with. Inspired by her answer of courage and compassion, along with a line of the other wonderful women in her family tree. You might say community service is in her DNA. I spoke with Susan and she was kind enough to share a picture with me. And as you recall, I mentioned that her father was the first African American police officer in Summit. So in the center is a picture of her father, her mother, and I believe in-laws from both sides. And also I included a picture from the Summit High School yearbook from Ancestry.com of Julius Gordon Dillingham. And we celebrate and honor him today, as well as Susan and the work that she's done. One of the things that I like to do is look at census records, and I didn't want to bore you with a bunch of them, but I wanted to include one on Susan's grandfather. And in the first slide that I shared about where folks came from, North Carolina was one of the places that was listed. And so on this census record, just to give you an example, her grandfather is listed, and again, that he came from North Carolina, and you can see the different headings here. For most census records. That's included rather in most census records. The second census record was for Susan's dad, and he's highlighted here, Julius, and he was 6 years old, and they were residing here in Summit. Excuse me. I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. I hope my presentation will encourage you to research the history of your town and the people who make up your community. Remember, history matters. And again, I was interested in the history of Summit, its people. I don't always focus on African Americans, but because their stories have not been shared on a broader scale, I decided to highlight them. If you have any questions, I welcome them, and fall in love with history. I always loved history in high school. And then when I was challenged by my husband to start doing the genealogy research, it opened up a whole new world to me. And my personal belief is when you know your history and you share and you celebrate, each person celebrates their community, it makes a huge difference, and we have a better understanding of where we come from and where we're going. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you again, Andrew, and the State Library of New Jersey.
Thank you so much, Janice. It was a fantastic presentation. I'm sure we all
Thank
learned a
you.
lot. So yes, if anybody does have any questions, please type them in the questions box, send them over, and we'll be happy to answer them. So we'll start off with a couple comments. One, excellent presentation, and another one, great job, Janice. I enjoyed learning about your town.
Wow.
So, and then now we can jump into the questions. One of the most interesting things in building context is hearing how many community members know each other and are influenced by each other. It's wonderful to build context and highlight recent history. What are some of the important things you learned about Summit, New Jersey as a result of your research? And are you planning on sharing your research with local schools and community organizations?
The answer to that would be yes. And what I've learned, I have to be honest here and tell you that I've lived here for over 30 years, and I focused a lot on my own personal research. But when I started working on this, I just thought my kids did not know this. I have 3 children that have gone through the Summit school system, and they were not aware of this. And so to me, it is important, if given the opportunity, to share my findings and the additional research that I plan to do, to share that with schools. And I know a couple of folks that work in the school district, and I can reach out to them. So yes, 100%, I feel that it's important for them to know. Because for me, as a 57-year-old woman, finding this out now, we do a disservice when we don't share all of our history. And again, I know that my children did not learn this. And there are other people, these are just a few. I didn't want the presentation to run on, but there are a number of people, other people that I could have included. And so I'll continue to work on this, and given the opportunity, I would love to share it again. And yes, I do plan to reach out to the schools, because it's important for not only all children, but children of color to know that, you know what, your history matters. You were a part of history. When I started doing my genealogy research, I just thought I came from this small town in South Carolina, and I know my family. But doing the research, as you mentioned when you read my the intro about me, I found out that I had family members that discovered started colleges. They were educators. They were professors. They traveled internationally. I knew none of that. So today is not the first day that I'm challenging folks to do the work and do the research and share it with your family. I've been doing it now for a long time. It's just now this presentation has impacted me. And I know that there, Summit is a predominantly, and I'm being upfront here, a white community, but there are children of color here that don't know this because they're not being taught it. So thank you so much for the question. And that's a challenge to me to go ahead and reach out and share the information that I found with some of the school districts that are willing to listen to what I have to share and what I found.
All right. What advice do you have for someone looking to undertake a local history project like yours?
I would say, number one, Wikipedia is your friend. Google is your friend, especially since the libraries are closed. The second thing is reach out to your local historical societies. I'll give you an example. I did a presentation, well, a group of us did a presentation about 2 weeks ago with the East Orange Public Library. And so we build the project or the presentation as little known Black history facts. And we wanted to focus on the people in the community and locations. Now, when it came down to the people, that wasn't too hard to do. But when it came down to locations, we did not find a lot of information. And I spoke with my husband, and he grew up in East Orange. He lived there for a certain amount of time. So he was able to share some of the local businesses that he recalled as a child. But I did not find any documentation. So there's the East Orange Historical Society, and I went on their Facebook page, I believe it is, and looked for information. So it's not to put anyone down, it's to say we have work to do. So number one, go ahead and start. If no one else has done it, you be the one to do it. And then whatever information you find, please share it. And if you don't find a lot, talk to the older people in the community. And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about, because you don't want that history to be lost. So I was so thankful that my husband shared some of the businesses that he remembered, but still, I did not find a lot. So that's another project that I'm working on. So first thing, go ahead and start. Second, reach out to the local historical society. And if they don't have the information that you're looking for, you may be the one to be able to do the research and provide them with that information.
All right. Another thank you for a fantastic presentation.
Oh, thank you for the feedback. That's very important. Thank you.
Next question is, what was your favorite discovery?
Oh, the female pastors. Let me just go back. I am really, really impressed with, let me just go to her slide. One moment. I was impressed with Reverend Florence Spearing Randolph. I love it when, you have an issue and you identify what the issue is, and then it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's make it happen. Let's make a difference. And so for me, she was, I would like to see a book written about her. I mean, I know they had the traveling tour for her, but traveling exhibit, excuse me, for her. But there should be written material for her, a book of some sort. I'm not saying that I want to be the person that does that. And if there's a publication out there that someone's aware of, please let me know, because I didn't find anything. I found a lot of newspaper articles about her and a lot of website references to her. But something should be written on her. She should have her own book. As I noted earlier, to me, she was just empowering and inspiring. And as Susan's mom mentioned, so many people will look at a problem, talk about a problem, and don't do anything to fix it. So for me, my energy is on what can I do to share history? What can I do to encourage folks to do their family history, which is why I'm a part of AAHGS, or the African American Historical and Genealogical Society. And there are a couple of other organizations that I plan on joining. So she's the one that stands out for me. And then the second person, Florence received there was a lot of media coverage for her, and people still talk about her today. But Violet Johnson, I haven't seen that much on her. So it was inspiring to learn about her, but I feel a call to talk about her more and spread the word about her and the work that she did.
Great. The next two questions are very similar, so I'm going to try and summarize them together. Essentially, what was it about Summit, New Jersey, if you know, that kind of attracted African Americans to settle there?
Well, in doing some of the research, hold on one second, let me just go back up to this slide. One moment. Okay, so in looking at the census records and finding out where most people came, there was something called the Black Great Migration. And so I know for me personally, I was born in South Carolina, but my family came to New Jersey for work. A lot of families came to New Jersey for work. So for this listing that I have, most of the people that came, that are listed, not the people, excuse me, most of the places that are listed, folks didn't say, oh, I just want to go, here. There was a family member that may have migrated to this area and said, hey, come here, you can work, you can find work. So based on what I've seen so far, most of the people that came to Summit, they came for work. You have families now that are moving to the area because of the school system, and Summit is a great town. I love, love, love my town. But most of the people, for the time frame that I'm speaking about and the notables, most of their families came here for work, for better opportunities and for work, and to, not that discrimination wasn't here in New Jersey. My goodness, I've experienced it in my town, but people are working together to make progress. But most of the people left the South or left some of the other locations that are listed here to escape the racism as well.
All right. Can you repeat the name of the historical society organization that you belong to?
Oh, AAHGS, the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, and there is a New Jersey chapter. If you go on the link that Andrew put up in the beginning, you'll see New Jersey listed, and you can reach out to us for more information. We actually meet once a month. It's the second Saturday at 11 a.m. And right now we're using Zoom to host our meetings because of the pandemic. But I've been a member since 2016. I love the organization. I love what we're doing. It gives us an opportunity to share history as well as encouraging folks to research their family history.
Right, and I posted that web address in the chat for
Okay.
everybody.
Yes, thank you. And they're more than welcome to contact me directly.
Sure, I'll send a follow-up email
Okay.
that'll have your information too.
Thank you.
Thank you, terrific presentation, really enjoyed it. So some more praise.
Wow, thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Yep, and again, if you have any more questions, please send them in the questions box and we can wait a few moments and see if any more come in.
Okay.
I guess I have a question. Do you think this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg that you've uncovered in terms of the African American influence in Summit, or do you think you've kind of gone through a lot of the weeds already?
Andrew, I would say tip of the iceberg because again, initially I had 37 slides and I thought, nah, don't do that. So I took some of them out. So it's the tip of the iceberg. I honestly, I had fun working on the project because again, I love history, I love genealogy, and I had to stop myself because when I got to Susan's parents, I just wanted to go on and create a whole tree for them, a family tree for them. And so I was like, nope, stay focused and get the presentation done. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I do see, I have other projects. I've actually made a list of projects that I would like to do based on the information that I received, that I uncovered or discovered as I was researching. And I can't wait for the libraries to be open again and the historical societies.
All right. What is the earliest piece of African American local history that you have found?
Oh, well, for this project, it would be for the churches. There was talk about Summit, New Jersey being a stop on the Underground Railroad, and I tried to find additional information on that. Someone shared that with me, And this was a little while ago, so I didn't find anything. But for me, that's something that if I do find it, it'll have its own presentation. So as far as African Americans, I know that there was some talk about it. I plan on following up on that. I didn't want to include anything that I could not have, provide additional content for, but that's one of the things I'd like to pursue, or pieces of information that was shared with me that I would like to pursue. And that is that Summit may have been one of the stops on the Underground Railroad here in New Jersey. And so as far as research goes, most people will tell you that because it was dangerous to do that, to be a stop, you won't find a lot of information about it. But I'm determined to find something. And if I do, you'll be the first person to know.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, looks like we don't have any more questions, so I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you, Janice, for a fantastic presentation and all the hard work that you've put into it. I'd like to thank everybody who attended today, as we, year after year, you continue to celebrate the achievements of African Americans, not only in the state of New Jersey, but throughout our country as well. And I'd just like to wish everybody a safe rest of the month. We look forward to reopening sometime in the near future, so we can all continue our research and continue these programming in person. But in the meantime, be safe, be well, and hopefully we will see you soon.
Thank you.